They weren't on.
Okay, all right. Well, Rick is out of town this weekend, and he asked me if I would teach the class for him. And I said I would, even though I don't particularly enjoy teaching. I love to teach, but it's hard to teach an auditorium class because people are scattered, and auditoriums weren't designed for class learning, I don't think. But we've got a good group here this morning, and we have 30 minutes to learn a lesson that hopefully you'll carry with you a few days. I appreciated what Scott had to say about the importance of holidays, and I fear we don't take enough time before we jump into the hamburger or the turkey to tell our kids what the holiday is all about. And we have a very important one coming up tomorrow. It reminds me of the story of the little boy that saw all these pictures hanging on the walls in the foyer of the church building. And he said to the preacher, "Who are those people?" And the preacher said, "Oh, son, those are such important men and women. They gave their lives in service." And the little boy said, "The first service or second service?" So this is in between. I'm getting to where I can't hear anything. I hope you can hear me. And when you speak up this morning, please speak up loudly, because I'll probably say, huh. And not only am I getting hard of hearing, but I've talked with many of you, and you tell me you can't hear either. So let's help each other. We're going to talk about forgiveness this morning. Forgiveness. Rick talked about pride last week, and I think there's an awful lot of relationship between the two. I think forgiveness is fundamental to the Christian life. Several years ago, quite a few years ago, someone wrote a book, Whatever Became of Sin. And I think a book could be written as its sequel, Whatever Became of Forgiveness. Let me ask you this, and just be honest with yourself. You don't have to raise your hand. How long has it been since you said to someone, "I was wrong"? And how long has it been since you said, "I am sorry"? Those three words are not hard to say, but when the time comes, they're very hard to say, it seems. The Bible has much to say about forgiveness. For example, you're very familiar with a passage in Matthew 6, verse 15. Jesus is very clear. If you are not willing to forgive others, then God will not forgive you. Plain and simple. If you are not willing to forgive, you have no right to expect forgiveness yourself. Similarly, in James chapter 2, the word mercy is used in a similar way. If you don't show mercy, you have no right to expect mercy to be granted to you. Now, one thing I found out, and I'm going to ask you some questions in a few minutes and find out from you, but I did not know this until I studied this week, but forgiveness is a uniquely Christian doctrine. All the other religions of the world do not include forgiveness as a central part of their religion. Even Judaism, in the Old Testament, we read time and time again in this Old Testament, words like send away. That is to send a scapegoat out in the wilderness. We remember that principle. They would mentally tie their sins to this scapegoat and send the scapegoat out into the wilderness to get rid of the sin. No forgiveness. Just send it away. And there's cover-up for atonement. Atonement for our sins, just cover up. There's the word remove or wipe away. And we read, remember no more. So, not until we come to the New Testament is forgiveness inseparable with the blood of Jesus Christ. Now, that's an important point to remember from now on. Not until Jesus Christ came and shed his blood was forgiveness a principle that was inseparable with his blood. And that's where the idea of unmerited favor comes into play. Now, I wanted us to read together a story, and then we'll talk about it. Turn to Matthew chapter 18, if you will, please. Matthew 18, starting in verse 21. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times? And Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Some versions say 70 times 7. That's 490. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. The servant fell on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged, and I'll pay you back everything. The servant's master took pity on him and canceled the debt and let him go. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him and began to choke him. Pay back what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees and begged him, be patient with me and I'll repay everything. But he refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. When the other servants saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in. You wicked servant, I canceled all the debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had on you? And in anger, the master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother from your heart. I have a sermon called $10 million and 17 cents. $10 million and 17 cents. How did I get that? This first debtor, and these numbers are a little old, so don't hold me to the accuracy. This is not about counting anyway. The forgiveness itself, 7 times 7, I think is an order of magnitude. It's not a specific limit. But these 10,000 talents are worth about $10 million in our currency today. So this man owes $10 million. How in the world did he get in debt by $10 million? I don't know. But this man who owes the money probably makes 1 denarius per day. That's 17 cents. So how is he going to pay off a $10 million debt when he's making 17 cents a day? That is the granddaddy of all debts. At least it used to be. It's pocket change, I guess, anymore for the government anyway. So it's an impossible debt to pay. And you know, the servant says, just be patient with me and I'll pay it all back. For this man, time is not his friend. Just think about this a moment. You owe $10 million. Now, back when I did the math, I used 9% interest. If this money is worth 9% per day, that's $75,000 per month. You can pay, and that's $900,000 a year. You can pay $900,000 a year, if you can, the rest of your life, and you won't pay off 1 penny of the debt. The debt is still there. You owe the whole thing. So the man who makes 17 cents a day says, be patient with me. Just give me more time. But he goes and finds another fellow whom he knows who owes him a little money. And he says, pay up everything you owe. And the guy says the same thing. I can't do it right now. Just give me a little time and I'll pay you the whole thing. No, I'm not giving you any more time. Throw him in the slammer. So where's his mercy? Okay, now I want to get you involved in this. Why? Well, first of all, this story of forgiveness is one that really troubles me, like the story of David and Bathsheba. That's one story in the Bible that has always troubled me. So has this story about the 2 debtors. Jesus said one time, 2 men had 2 debts. One owed 50 denarii, and the other owed 500. And they both were forgiven. So which one do you think appreciated it the most? And the answer came back, the one who was forgiven more. And Jesus said, of course, the more you're forgiven, the more you will appreciate it. But here's a guy that owes $10 million, doesn't appreciate it. So now, what are your thoughts about forgiveness? Why are we not so forgiving many times? Why are we reluctant to forgive?
Well, that's another one of those easy words to say until it's time to mean it, and then it becomes very hard.
Yeah, it's easy to say until the time comes to do it, and then it's not so easy. I remember one time at Christmas time, my family was together, and my 3 married sisters and their husbands were there. Somehow we got on the subject of marital infidelity, I think, and my oldest sister, Jackie, had a husband named Arnold. We were talking about forgiving 7 times 7, and she said, I don't know that I can do that. I might could forgive Arnold once or twice, but I don't think I could 7. And he smiled and said, well, at least I got a couple of times coming. I don't know if you read the paper like I do, looking for something to do or to read. There's not much in it anymore. But occasionally I'll look at Dear Abby or Ann Landers. Over and over and over again, the same story comes in. My sister and I had a falling out, And now we don't get together for Thanksgiving or Memorial Day or July the 4th or anything. We need help to reconcile our differences, but we're not getting anywhere. The letter may say it's been 20 years since we had a falling out. So I ask you, who is hurting from this impasse? Everybody. The children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren.
I was just going to say on the forgiveness thing, though, sometimes people associate forgiveness with acceptance, like that you're going to accept that action to continue. You can forgive somebody and not accept their actions. You don't have to turn a blind eye.
Yeah. Okay. Did you hear what she said? You can forgive somebody and not accept what they did, not turn a blind eye. I think a lot of times forgiveness is just taken for granted. Well, you know, I'm sorry I did it, but I know he knows that I'm sorry I did it. Well, he may not know you're sorry you did it. What does it hurt to go say? Just in case you don't know, I am sorry. What happened 5 years ago? Pardon? Absolutely. It ties in with what Rick taught last week. Pride gets in the way. I'm not going to humble myself. It was as much his fault as it was my fault. I'm not going to bow myself to his level and go beg forgiveness. What's wrong with that statement?
There's so much pride.
Pride. Yeah, pride.
Watching out for number one as opposed to caring about the other person.
Pardon?
Watching out for number one as opposed to caring for the other person.
Yeah, watching out for number one as opposed to the other person. What's in it for me? I'm going to take care of my own feelings. Who benefits the most when you forgive someone? I read a book on this a few years ago, and it opened my eyes. You know, you can go through this whole life carrying a grudge. The hospitals, the nursing homes have people in them of people who feel guilty. They cannot get over something they did, but they're not about to go to someone and try to correct it and wipe the slate clean. And so we'll carry subconscious guilt feelings, or not so subconscious, and let it drive us crazy rather than to bow down and go see a friend or a spouse and say, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I was wrong. I'm sorry. A lot of people will say it was as much his or her fault as it was mine, and maybe that's very well true. And so they will go on waiting for someone to make the first move, or maybe not even caring if someone makes the first move, and carry that grudge for a long, long time. Instead, what they should realize, and what you and I should realize, is that when we decide to take the first step and say, whatever happens doesn't matter, but I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to go say, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And what happens from then on is in your court. The ball is in your court. You can choose to accept my forgiveness, or you can reject my forgiveness. But it's not on my back anymore. I have done the Christian thing, and I've apologized. I've asked for forgiveness. If you don't want forgiveness, that's your problem. That's your privilege, but I am telling you, I'm sorry. What's wrong with that concept? You are the one who is going to benefit the most the rest of your life. It's not on your record anymore. It's not on your heart anymore. You have put the ball in his or her court. What are your thoughts? I'm doing too much talking. I'd like to hear from you.
Bill, we were on it a minute ago, we were rubbing up against it, but seeing each other as human.
Yeah.
The king, the text says that he had compassion on the one. And then he goes out, of course, and he doesn't have compassion. So there's an element of recognizing the commonality of our humanity.
Yes.
In these situations.
Yes.
You know, so that comes into play.
It's absolutely about compassion and mercy.
Right. It wasn't that the king thought about it and said, well, you know, I got plenty of money. I can afford to let this guy off the hook.
Yeah.
He had compassion on him.
Yeah.
And it would seem to indicate that no matter how much, of course, he was a king, so it's
right.
Considered, but you know, it wasn't a matter of how much money he had. It was a matter of feeling compassion because of the debt was so great. He could just see that there's no way this guy's going to get out of this.
Yeah.
And he's gotten himself into it, and he had.
You know, if having lived a few years, if I could think back over the years at all the hurt feelings that I know about, I would say 80 or 90% of those are with relatives, or in the same family, or even in the same marriage. Long time ago, there used to be a song, "You only hurt the ones you love, the ones you shouldn't hurt at all." You only hurt the one you love, the one you shouldn't hurt at all. So if we're hurting the ones who are most important to us, why don't we say to ourselves, self, I need to bury my pride, and I need to bury my ego, and I need to make right with this person and be happy the rest of our lives. Now, one more point. We've got 6 or 7 minutes. In this story, this first debtor owes $10 million. Yeah, Don?
Who we serve each day? Do we serve ourselves to the world, or do we serve the Lord who gave his life for us? And if I'm doing that, I don't have an excuse.
Yeah.
So it's what's in our heart, what indwells us. You know, what's the passage all about? Whatsoever good things are good and honest.
Yeah.
Think on these things. Ephesians 4. So anyway, it's who we serve.
Who are we serving? Yeah, who? We are all servants. There's not one of us who's the king in this way. We're all servants. Yeah.
In my experience, that the hardest person of all to forgive is yourself.
Absolutely. He's saying the hardest person to forgive is yourself. It seems like that troubled David about his sin with Bathsheba. Psalm 51, others seem to indicate he just couldn't turn it loose. Even though he was told by the servant of God, you are forgiven. He probably said, I know, but I really messed up. I really messed up, and I'm so sorry. I'm ashamed of myself. I can't let it go. But we need to learn to let it go, because God promised to remember no more those sins which he has forgiven. Now this debtor that owes $10 million, it's a little bit hard for you and me to identify with him. At least I think it is. I sort of think, in fact, I heard a young preacher giving a testimony one time. He said, he was from Texas. He said, I grew up in America. I came from a Christian family, and I thought I was a Christian. So let me make this point. Most of us have grown up in America, lived in a Christian home, paid our taxes, told the truth for the most part, did the right things. And we don't identify with a $10 million debt. You think back, I've tried to do the right thing. I may have told one or two little white lies, but other than that, I don't know anything really bad that I've done. What is the problem with that thinking? And think hard on it, because I don't know the answer for sure. What is the problem with that thinking? Don?
I don't know the answer either, but we tend to rationalize, the circumstances. We rationalize, well, it must be this, so I'm able to do this to this person. And we can't rationalize it.
Yeah.
Because our standards are not good, are poor.
Yeah, we rationalize, and that's a point I wanted to make about this second guy. The second guy, or the guy who owed so much and went out and would not forgive a very small debt with his friend, he expected other people to live up to standards that he was not willing to live up to himself. Scott, I hate to call on you, but this $10 million debt, how would you explain that to the person who says, I haven't done that much wrong?
I think it's just that we do not understand the magnitude of sin and its crime against God. We don't, we tend to put things in big and little pictures, and any transgression, sin is any transgression of the law of God. And so any small thing that we think we've done that we call small is still a sin against God. There's no way that we can repay and be good enough to make up for that sin.
Right.
So the debt is more than $10 million. The debt
Right.
is the wage of sin is death. So there's no way to, it's hard until somebody grasps back. You can't. Right.
I appreciate that comment. I think I'm about to wrap this up, but I think that the message of this story is this. There is absolutely no relationship between our debt and our ability to repay our debt. Whatever the amount of the debt may be, our resources are peanuts compared to what the debt we owe to God is. And so if we think we can save ourselves, if we think we can make it on our own, if we think we can handle all of our debts, if we think we owe no one anything, even God, we are terribly, terribly foolish. And the point is, there really is no relationship between the debt we owe to God and our ability to repay that debt. Well, I think we'll close with that. We've got a minute or two. Any more comments? Yes, sir?
Psalm 103.
What does it say?
Oh, that's the one that's got as far as the east is from the west. The Lord forgives our transgressions. The whole psalm is about forgiveness. It's really great.
Yeah.
Good chance to read it.
Yeah. Okay. Psalm 103.
And that's also what you've covered is basically a parable on God's forgiveness to us. He's going to forgive us in the same way that we forgive others.
Yes, exactly. So we need to keep that in mind. The extent to which we're willing to forgive is the extent to which we have a right, if you will, to expect God will forgive us, or vice versa. Okay, well, thank you for your participation.
Thank you for your enunciation.